Today's episode of Lions of Liberty is brought to you by MathBot.com. MathBot.com is a fun little game that fills a serious hole that the public and even the private schools miss, and that is knowledge of programming and the math behind programming. MathBot.com gives parents a much-needed tool to make sure their children don't fall behind in this new information age. Software is eating the world, and those who don't know how to code will be left behind as more and more jobs become automated. MathBot.com gives kids and even adults like me the knowledge needed to thrive in this new world. MathBot may just seem like a fun and simple game, but behind the scenes it uses the same method Julius Caesar, Isaac Newton, Einstein, and everyone else were all taught math before the state got its greasy hands into education. This method goes all the way back to classical Greece, the dawn of civilization. MathBot will gradually upload the math and logical skills needed to understand programming into the mind of any player. It's said that the pen is mightier than the sword, but now code is even mightier than the pen. So become mighty and learn to code over at mathbot.com.
Welcome to the Lions of Liberty podcast. Here's your host, your guide, your shining beacon of liberty, Mark Claire.
Meow. Sorry, guys. All I have are meows today. I don't really have a roar in me because as I record this voiceover, this introduction to today's program, I am a little bit hungover. And the reason I'm hungover is because of our Patreon-only 2-hour-long Libertarians in Living Rooms Drinking Liquor that we just did the other night. That is available to all patrons of this show who pledge at $5 or higher. You can find out more about that over at patreon.com/Lions of Liberty. Really helps us to grow and fund the show. We do not take a dime of that money. It all goes back into bringing you great conversations about the ideas of liberty like I've been bringing you here on the flagship Lions of Liberty podcast each and every Monday for over 5 years now. And I'm going to keep on doing that as long as you guys keep showing up to listen. I've got a great guest today, but before I get to him, I want to remind you guys that it's not just me here. I have other Lions who bring you their own style of roaring for liberty. Brian McWilliams hits you smack in the face every single Wednesday with his rant-filled outlook on comedy, culture, and liberty every single Wednesday on Electric Liberty Land, while John Odermatt wraps things up every Friday with his incredible, hard-hitting look at the broken criminal justice system on a little show we call Felony Friday. Trust me when I tell you, my friends, you do not want to miss a single episode, and that's why you got to hit that subscribe button, whether you're listening to an Apple podcast, maybe you listen on Stitcher, maybe you listen on Overcast like I do, maybe you just like to scream at your Alexa, "Alexa, play me Lions of Liberty on TuneIn." That works also. Many ways to listen to this program, although you can't really subscribe on Alexa as far as I know. I guess you just have to routinely yell at her every single Monday, Wednesday, and Friday to play your Lions of Liberty. But whatever works for you guys, we are just glad to have you here roaring with us 3 days a week. And I do have a little announcement, a very special announcement about a slight tweak to the format of this program. I'll be telling you about that after today's interview, which luckily I was not hungover when I recorded. So please give a great Lions of Liberty roar to today's guest. My guest today is a guitarist, a mix engineer, and producer for the band Arrested Development, and he just so happens to also be a sprouting Rothbardian libertarian, and that is, of course, why he is here with me today. I'm very pleased to welcome Jason JJ Boogie Reichert. Jason, are you ready to roar?
Ready to roar.
Yeah. All right, now, JJ, I have Jason or JJ. We talked a bit about the show, which you'd prefer being called, and I'm just going to bounce back and forth between both. I think that's what I've decided, if that's cool.
Doesn't bother me.
Now, I was a fan of the band Arrested Development before you were even in the band, in the early 90s when I was growing up. And then one day, I don't even remember now if it was on Twitter, because I've interacted with you a bit online between our Facebook group, the Lions of Liberty Forum, our public group, as well as on Twitter. You're also active over in the Mises Caucus group. I started seeing you popping up a lot, and I saw that you're in the band Arrested Development, and I kind of like, oh, that's pretty interesting. I used to love that band. So you have become more familiar with you over the last few months because you're pretty active in the conversation. So I thought, thought when the beginning of the year, when I went on Twitter and started asking people for suggestions, I think you tossed a few suggestions out, but I also said to myself, well, why don't I just bring you on the show and find out how you got here? So before we dig too deeply into your current political views and how you got there, why don't I just get to know you a little bit better? So why don't you just kind of start off telling us how you got involved with music in general, how that became a passion of yours, and how you eventually found yourself working with the band Arrested Development.
Cool. Yeah. Well, I think, like a lot of people, not a lot, I don't know how many people, but my father was a saxophone player back in the, 50s and 60s. He played in soul bands and stuff up in New York. And so that was, his passion. So I grew up I had this amazing record collection, growing up. So I was always, we had, anything from Tony Bennett, Sinatra to Fleetwood Mac and Tower of Power, anything with horns, anything with funky, Motown, Stevie Wonder, Steely Dan, Chicago, So I just grew up with, music in the house, and they were always supportive of music. Boom, got me a drum set, started playing. Next thing you know, some guys, including my uncle, who my parents work with, asked me to be they're like, man, we need a drummer for this band doing, classic rock and blues and stuff like that. So I started gigging semi-pro at 15. I'm playing in nightclubs. You had to be 21, to get in. And, so I started doing that. My parents were super supportive, and, so that was just awesome. So I did that,
Were you allowed to play at the age of 15? Or were you allowed to even be in the nightclub, or were they kind of sneaking you in there?
They were sneaking me in.
So you're a rebel from the beginning, really.
Yeah, totally. So I was playing clubs, and then, my dad would drive me to the gigs, before I got my own driver's license. And then, they trusted me once I got, they were worried, obviously, when I was coming home at 4 a.m. My dad, he's up having coffee, reading the paper, and I'm just getting home from, gigging all night, but,
we had very different experiences in high school.
Yeah. So I did that for many years. And then, actually, years later, how I met Speech from Arrested Development is actually at my church. I started going to at a specified ministry for artists and entertainers here in Atlanta. And so hooked up with him, and I was playing, in the church band. I was playing drums and guitar. I don't know if you know, I was a professional drummer first before I switched over to guitar. And
I did not know that.
Yeah. So the drums was my first instrument. That's what I was playing back in the day. And then I switched to guitar later. And then Speech started having me go into the studio whenever he would need a drummer. I guess, when his regular guys weren't around, he was like, let me get JJ over here, and then a couple times I filled in on a couple live gigs for a Speech solo band. Because at the time, Arrested Development had broken up in 96. So from 96 to 2000, he was doing his solo stuff, and his solo career exploded in Asia. Didn't do good in the States, but in Asia, it was like number one on the charts, rock star stuff. It was, which was amazing. And anyway, so I started recording on those records that were being released over there. And then I co-wrote a song on the Arrested Development Reunion album that came out in 2000. And so he had me come in the studio, met all the band, and I had a relationship with him, but it's starting to really spend more time with them. And then I did that for the next couple of years. He was in my, we became best friends. He was in my wedding, one of my groomsmen in my wedding and stuff. And then in 2005, he had issues with his regular guitar player, and I had decided he had to let him go. And so they came home and from this big tour in Australia. He was like, hey, I need a guitar player. You want to come to Japan with me on this next run? And I'm like, oh, let me check my schedule. Yep. Okay.
Turns out I'm free.
Yeah. So I learned the material, and, drums not being my first instrument. Drums being my first instrument, not guitar being my first instrument. It was hard for me to pick up stuff on guitar, like from listening.
Well, had you just been dabbling in guitar before? How much guitar experience did you have before he approached you with this?
Guitar when I was 16, I just noodled because, my parents didn't allow me to play drums in the house or in the garage past 7:30 at night because it would bother the neighbors and my parents. So I used to beat on my pillows. I'd set up my pillows on my bed and jam along the albums, and and they finally got me a guitar, like just so I could have another outlet. But I was kind of self-taught. I didn't know what I was doing. I barely touched it. But once I started kind of learning it more, I started actually learning some chords and scales. And then I used to host the blues jam sessions in Atlanta, and as the drummer. And then whenever a drummer would get up, I'd have to go sit at the bar or play pool, and I'd just be bored. And these guys would come in and bring their guitars. And I'm like, man, some of these guys that would sit in at blues jams were not that good. And I'm like, well, I'm doing that at home in my bedroom, what they're doing. I'm going to start bringing my guitar out. And a lot of the local cats or my friends, they didn't really like me switching over to guitar. They thought it was cute at first and fun as a joke. And then when they saw me getting serious, they were like, yeah, we got enough guitar players in Atlanta, you know.
Is there a bit of a territorial attitude when they see someone like you trying to hop instruments or what have you?
Well, it was funny because my band leader at the time, I was playing with this blues band called Mudcat. And Mudcat was a great guitar player. He did a lot of slide, gut bucket, blues stuff. He was always very supportive. And he was my own band leader. He would let me open up gigs playing guitar while the conga player would play my drums. And we would switch. And he was always supportive. And he was the one guy that was like the biggest support for me, you know, locally, who was like, man, do it, you know, even though you're my drummer, you know, he supported me playing guitar. But anyways, going back to Arrested Development, yeah, in 2005, I had a friend of mine, I got the audition tapes from Speech, the band leader of Arrested Development. I'm not the audition tapes, the VHS tapes of a show, so I could learn the material from the guitar player. I couldn't figure out half the stuff he was doing because it was like really cool funk, crazy stuff. And
so you're literally just watching the video and trying to mimic what you're hearing? You don't have music in front of you or anything?
I literally had a friend of mine who was studying jazz at Georgia State, and he came over and he learned the show for me, and then he taught it to me. And then I went and I auditioned. I still had to audition for the rest of it. He wanted to make sure I gelled with the band, and the band, you know, dug me.
Sure.
So when I went, I nailed the audition, and then the rest is history. So started playing in front of, you know, 80,000 people, 50,000 people in these big festivals down to, you know, we play small clubs too, but, you know, we're traveling all over the world. And I'm like, for years, I still was, in my mind was like, I'm a drummer. I just happen to play a little bit of guitar.
When you're professionally touring the world as a guitarist.
It was a mind trip because everybody knew me as a drummer. You know, now people, I got so many friends now on Facebook that most people now, they only know me as a guitar player. They don't know my old life. Unless you went to high school with me or knew me from back in the days when I was touring with a blues band, you know. So, yeah, so it's kind of funny.
I mean, I've been doing this podcast for over 5 years, but I still just do podcasting on the side.
Yeah. Well, hey, you never know. It might change one day, right? Stick with it.
I'm curious, JJ, when in this whole mix here, in this time period, how recently did you start to come upon your political views? I mean, did you grow up with politics being discussed in your household? Obviously, we know you were defying the state even at the young age of 15 by defying their minimum, I guess it wasn't necessarily drinking law, but to be in the club.
Right. Well, yeah, it's kind of weird. I was thinking about that, the whole evolution of just how I came to be where I'm at now. And you know, I was talking to one of my old bandmates who I was in a band with when I was like 18. And I remember we discussed it, and he finally, once I brought it up, he remembered it. But I was 18. I was playing with this my second band. And for some reason, the three of us, we was a trio. One of them was like, man, let's go to this libertarian local meeting in Atlanta. And I don't even remember, you know, it was some bar at downtown Atlanta. And I went, and I didn't know anything about politics.
Was this like a meetup or a libertarian party thing?
It was somebody was kind of spoke for a bit, and it was like a meetup. Yeah, it was kind of, it's vague. I mean, I was smoking a lot of pot back then and stuff.
The details are a little fuzzy. I understand.
Yeah. And, you know, so we went, and it wasn't like a life-changing event or anything, but it was my first time doing anything remotely political. And then I remember I bought this book by David Boaz or something. He
wrote about right.
A book on libertarianism. I bought that. I read that years ago. And I remember thinking, yeah, okay, this is pretty cool. But, you know, back then I'm a kid, you know, my life is sex, drugs, and rock and roll, you know, back then. So my main thing was practicing and gigging and everything else, you know. So I kind of got out of, I didn't really stick with it. I didn't really retain it or anything. I didn't vote or anything. And it really wasn't until 9/11, you know, that I was just like, okay, I need to start paying attention to what's going on. And that's when I started like watching the debates and, you know, and getting involved. And so, at that point I'm thinking, well, I only really have two choices, you know, Republican or Democrat. And I'm going to go with whoever has the most hint of libertarianism. You know, that was my thinking.
Right.
And so I thought, okay, well, the Republicans will probably do, my best route, smaller government, so they say, so I did that for a while, and then I voted, and I was just would not feel, my conscience would not be clear every time. I was just like, this just doesn't feel right, but once I don't even know how I got into listening to libertarian podcasts. I don't even remember, I started listening to Tom Woods and Lions of Liberty and David Smith. Tom Woods, I think, was probably the first. I don't know how
Tom always seems to get him first somehow.
Yeah. Well, and I read Thomas Sowell's Basic Economics. I read a lot of Thomas Sowell's books. So, that, and then I would listen to conservative podcasts, and I'd be like, some of the stuff, I'm like, okay, that's good. And then I'd go back and look at what the Republicans were doing, and I'm like, that's not what they say. That's not what they claim. They're not practicing what they preach. And then, I just, after a long time, I just got tired of it. Ron Paul came out, and I was just like, yeah, like that's, right there, And I even had my boss at one point he's kind of an enigma. He's very left-leaning in many areas, but he's right-leaning in certain areas.
Are you referring to speech here?
Yeah. So he pretty much votes Democrat, but even when he's not really likes the candidate, but he just so we don't have to dive deep into that. But at one point I remember him saying, man, if Ron Paul were the candidate, I'd vote for him. And I'm thinking, that was kind of weird. I'm like, something. That's, I was like, but he said, I know he's not going to be the candidate, so I'm just going to vote, Democrat. And I'm like,
I can't tell you how many times I heard similar statements to that. I actually canvassed for Ron Paul out here in California, of all places, back when he was running in 2008. And we found so many people who actually, when you get into the conversation about them, because obviously most people I'm talking to out here, especially in Los Angeles, are already of that sort of progressive bent left leaning, but they were also very legitimately anti-war in many ways. So they did have favorable things to say about Ron Paul, but then you always would hit this wall where they agree with this and that. Oh, they think he's great against the war and great against the war on drugs, but he's not going to win, so I'll just vote for the Democrats. It was how we'd have a 20 to 30 minute conversation sometimes. You're really thinking you're getting somewhere, but then they always seem to default back to that left-right paradigm. I got to go with whoever has that chance to win. It seems one of the most difficult things to overcome, at least in terms of speaking with people about practical politics.
Yeah. I'm still trying to wrap my brain about why that is with certain people, because I know other people who lean libertarian or whatever, or even left libertarian. To me, that's an oxymoron, but that's what they say. And then they were mad at Ron Paul for running as a Republican. Like I'm like, whatever. Yeah, I know why he did it. And his libertarian philosophy was able to get out to a lot of people because he ran as a Republican, But I think a lot of people they liked a lot of Ron Paul's ideas, but I think they're afraid because they've been so ingrained and indoctrinated through like government schooling that, that you have to have big government somewhere in there doing something, otherwise, there's going to be big government monopolies. And, the way that they oftentimes, to me, criticize capitalism, they're not really criticizing free market capitalism. They're criticizing cronyism. They see cronyism and they think it's capitalism. So capitalism's bad, So whenever there's getting these discussions, it's always like, I'm always trying to like clarify your terms. So so we can come to an agreement or a disagreement. Like there's no clear terms anymore, when it comes to words, capitalism, racism, this and that. It's like, it's a big mesh, and it makes it where everybody ends up talking past each other and you can't really agree on anything.
I think that's the big problem that I've had with the Republican/conservative point of view. I grew up in sort of a Republican household, and I liked a lot of the ways things sound, like personal responsibility and, not relying on the government for everything, helping each other, helping your communities. That all made sense to me. But as I became more and more in tune and aware of politics, I realized that so often many Republicans and conservatives weren't really arguing for free markets. They were arguing to, I guess, sort of conserve the present system. And when you you really dig into it, you begin to realize the present system, sure, it has many elements of free markets, more so than a lot of other countries out there, but what they're defending isn't really free markets. It's not even really capitalism. It's like you said, crony capitalism, and it's really hard to be on that side of things, especially when, at least in my world here, I'm sure in yours as well, you talk to so many people on the left, and if you just defend the current system, you really do come across as, as really just supporting the big corporations, because you kind of are, because that's who utilizes these regulations, utilizes all these laws to maintain their sort of stranglehold over the economy. Whereas I think real free markets, in the sense that a libertarian means them, would look so drastically different from what Republicans and conservatives currently defend that there's really hardly any reason to even associate with it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And, and I see that from the left as well. It's like, same thing with them. So, yeah, it boggles my mind. But I know now, after listening to so many, podcasts and, audio books, Mises stuff, Rothbard, his Libertarian Manifesto, Ron Paul's book. I usually do, I don't read physical books. I listen to audiobooks because I'm on the road a lot. And so it's just easier for me just to put the buds in and zone out and do that. But now, after, you see the expression woke all the time. It's like, it's funny and it's cliche now, but now I feel like I'm actually the woke one. There's no way I could go back to, to where I was before. Like, knowing what I know now. Yeah.
Is there any moment to you? I mean, for me, I was getting into libertarian ideas and started to take interest in Ron Paul and hit a lot of things he was saying even before the debates. But to me, there was like a woke moment I have. And for me, I think, and for a lot of people, it was the moment where he stood up to Rudy Giuliani and insisted that, yes, in fact, even the CIA agrees that our actions overseas, our military occupations do create terrorists and do cause terrorism and are one of the primary motivations. Giuliani demanded an apology, and instead Ron Paul just doubled down. And that to me woke me up, not necessarily to just what he was saying, because it was already very logical in my mind. It made perfect sense. It was more the way he said it and the fact that he was being laughed at literally by the audience and everyone else on stage. But even under the face of that, what many other people would find humiliating, he doubled down on his stance and he stood firm and said, no, you are all wrong. No matter whether you laugh at me or not, this is the correct stance. Do you have any moments in mind that sort of were, I guess, what, like you said, woke moments to you, moments that stood out as you just saying, not only is this necessarily something I believe, but it's something I have to actually stand up for and be out there talking about?
Yeah, I think probably the initial, it wasn't back when I went to that, that meeting back in 91 or 92 or whatever it was, that it was definitely years later. Right after 9/11, and then reading, I think it was a Thomas Sowell stuff. It wasn't a TV moment. I think it was just, started reading his articles and then just reading economics and seeing how policies affect people's lives and seeing how specific policies were, like even in South Africa, how they used the minimum wage to drive blacks out of the market, during apartheid. I mean, minimum wage was used as a weapon against blacks. And then here, people screaming and cry for, minimum wage, and they have no idea what it does to minorities, economically. So to me, I think the big woke moment was reading Thomas Sowell's economic books, that really was just like, wow.
That sort of made you realize that a lot of the feel-good policies out there actually do the opposite of what people advocating for them would like them to do. The classes of people that they are trying to defend, and I think many people are well-intentioned when they advocate a minimum wage, but what they don't realize is that there actually is a complete opposite effect to the one that they actually want to see.
Yeah, yeah. And that's it, and then, how it is when politicians they introduce a new bill, it has some fluffy name, and it's, the Patriot Act or whatever. And it's always like the opposite of what what it's entitled, So, yeah. But now I feel like when I don't watch news anymore, but when I used to watch CNN and Fox and stuff a lot more, I would just be like, oh my God, oh God, what is this garbage spewing out of their mouth? Whether it be a Democrat or Republican, I was like,
Once you become a libertarian woke, as you might say, it's really, really difficult to watch hardly any, not just cable news, even like mainstream TV shows, because so much politics and assumptions about government are really baked into those shows that you don't even think about until you sit down and watch some of this stuff. And it's almost unbearable. That's why I spend so much time listening to podcasts now.
Exactly. No, my phone is just, I mean, I got so many now that, I don't even touch the TV. The only time I watch cable news is if I'm in the airport or if I'm in a hotel, for a minute. Even now, it's like I'll turn the TV off and just throw on my iPhone and open up a podcast, but it's now podcasts, and Twitter is a great source of news as well.
Oh, yeah, you're pretty active on Twitter.
Yeah. Stuff pops up. It's funny though, just to see like breaking stories come out on Twitter before it hits TV.
Always. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Hey friends, I got to take a quick pause here to tell you about another great libertarian podcast out there. It's called Free Man Beyond the Wall, hosted by the artist formerly known as Mance Rayder, now known simply by his real name of Pete Raymond. And I got to tell you, Pete is a machine. This guy brings you a new episode of his own every single Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and he has done some absolutely fantastic in-depth interviews. He's had on everybody from Ron Paul to Thaddeus Russell to Phil Labonte, the lead singer of All That Remains, a very diverse group of guests, not always libertarians. He also did a great show with a Washington, D.C. insider lobbyist revealing a lot of the dirt that goes on behind the scenes in DC. He has done so many interviews that I have just said, darn, I wish I did this one myself. So I really do want to highly recommend checking out Free Man Beyond the Wall. You can find it over at freemanbeyondthewall.com, as well as iTunes, Stitcher, and all those fancy podcatchers out there. What's great about Twitter, too, is if you follow people you trust, they're going to be telling you about the news that you need to hear about. So that's pretty much where I get all my news, are by following sources that I trust, not just even libertarian sources. I follow, progressives like Glenn Greenwald, just people that I know are going to be talking about things in a legitimate way, from a truthful point of view, an honest point of view, as opposed to just spewing the propaganda, which is just all you're going to get on cable news, unless you happen to tune in to Dave Smith, on Kennedy or something.
Right. Yeah. And it's funny because then, when I'm out on the road and then the band starts talking about it, current events and stuff. And, there have been many long hours of debates and arguments on gun control and, Trump and, Hillary or Obama, and, I used to engage and I got to a point where I had to just put in my earbuds and check out and just let them go. Because I know there's only so far I could go with free market capitalism or, just
right.
freedom in general, so that's a lot of times that could be code words to people, but it's tough being a musician and, where 99% of my peers and friends are, very far left leaning, when it comes to that. I get a few messages on Facebook that are people like, hey man, keep doing what you're doing. They won't say it.
From people in your industry or?
Yeah. I've had a couple really cool people that I admire, on a huge level, musicianship wise, who are, big in their field that, hit me a message and be like,
really?
Hey, keep doing what you're doing.
But they got to do it in the DMs. They're not tweeting back to you publicly.
And I stopped posting on my personal timeline. I now most of my conversations are in private groups,
right? Because
I don't want to lose work. I'm a mix engineer. I do pro studio stuff, and and I don't want to lose gigs. Any future possible gigs, endorsements, stuff like that. Not to say that I don't get paid for those, but there are companies where I get discounts on gear, and I need that. I'm a professional musician, and sometimes I'll make great money for a tour, and then sometimes I'm off for 2 months. And all of a sudden that big paycheck's and I'm like, okay, I got to hustle.
Hopefully they don't come across this Lions of Liberty podcast here.
Yeah. So anyway.
Now, I'm curious what, when you're traveling the world, obviously you're traveling all over the world, touring with Arrested Development. I'm curious what sort of conversations you might get into with other people, not necessarily other musicians, but just people you happen to run into in your travels. I've done a good bit of traveling myself, and I always find it fascinating talking, not necessarily directly talking politics with people, but just getting people's perspectives on their situations and really realizing that the perspective of people in a lot of other countries is just so vastly different that you are able to find a lot of value, even if you're not agreeing with, what their political stance might turn out being. Have you found that at all in your travels?
I found, I was just in Europe in November. We were all over Europe, and we were in France when those protests started happening, the Yellow Vest folks.
Yeah.
Literally, I got a video like from my hotel window at the intersection, right in front of the hotel. They started it right there, blocking traffic. I'm trying to sleep. I'm jet lagged and the horns are going off. People are pissed off. And, and then we finally get to the gig later that night. We're having dinner and there's like the artist relations person there from the promoter. And, she's real sweet. And it's funny because she's like one of the people who are like, I get to hear her perspective on America and American politics. And to me, it was really no different than your average American Democrat. It was, I can't believe people are allowed to carry guns and people think they got, big penises by carrying, and they love guns and violence and, and then next thing you know is like everybody's bashing gun ownership. And there's me and there's one other person in the band who I know doesn't, agree. And we're the two quiet ones.
Just kind of looking at each other across the room like,
yeah, I'm like, I'll get up and go get me some more coffee. A lot of time at this point, I used to participate more, but I'm not good with keeping cool under those talks. It's hard for me to not get emotional myself, and it's tough because, my band, we're all super close friends. I mean, we always get along. It's very rare we fight. We've been on tours with other bands. We see how cliquey other bands are and how they fight, and we always get along. So we love each other a lot. But yeah, and there was another member who I gave her some links to some economic books because she heard me talking about economics. She wanted to learn a little bit more about it. So I gave her some Thomas Sowell stuff. And even I sent her one time a link to Eric July speaking on a certain topic. And she was blown away, So I'm grateful for him being out there talking about it, just like he was grateful for Walter Williams and Thomas Sowell, talking. He was able to look to somebody, like him and be like, oh, here's something radically different than everybody else, So, but yeah, so that's one example. But yeah, the typical, most people's views that I find overseas are pretty much like your average, Democrat over here on Facebook, railing, it's very rare you see somebody over there that's like advocating for free markets and small government.
Yeah, at least here it is in some ways ingrained in the culture that even people that don't agree with those concepts, that's a part of the dialogue. But really, free markets and individual rights, when you're speaking to Europeans, that isn't even really on the table. I mean, we're basically starting at their starting point. What might be called a conservative in many countries is what might be called far left progressive here. So the bar is kind of slid over in a very much further to the left.
Yeah, it's hard to keep up. It's hard to keep up with that with a liberal, what liberal means here or there. And then even here, I know a lot of conservatives who don't want to be called a conservative anymore. They want to be called a liberal again, like because of what the word actually means. They're mad that it's been hijacked, the words.
I'm mad it's been hijacked too. Whenever I hear the word liberal in reference to progressives or Democrats, I just kind of cringe because I think to myself, like, that should be our word. It's literally the beginning of what we're called now. It's it's the word means free, and it's basically the basis of our entire philosophy. We're the real liberals out there, and yet somehow it's become so associated with policies and philosophies that are just vastly, vastly different.
Well, it is. It's frustrating. And part of me says, you know what, let's get everybody to start calling ourselves liberals again, those who are actual libertarians. And then when you're talking with someone and then you like, maybe you in a discussion or a conversation, you advocate for something that's not left leaning. They were like, wait, I thought you said you're liberal. I am. It's doctrine to free men. Then they were like,
I am. What are you?
Yeah. Yeah. So part of me thinks we should just go ahead and just start doing it.
I'm on board. I think we should start the campaign to take liberal back.
Yeah.
Hashtag it. Maybe not from your Twitter account since you're trying to avoid that, but
right.
I'll hashtag it.
Twitter, I've been going, I don't get much discussions, but I retweet a lot of Tom Woods stuff and anything, that's libertarian. I post a lot of stuff there. It's mainly on Facebook that I stopped getting into it with people. It's sad because I've been blocked by some friends who I thought they were friends, but people I've been friends with for a long time. A guy that was in my wedding, blocked me. His daughter was one of the flower girls and blocked me over a gun rights discussion. He started bashing my father-in-law, who is, he's a retired vet, and my father-in-law is a simple man. He's got shotguns and a couple handguns, and he grew up in Tennessee hunting and stuff. So it's like he's got a gun rack, so he wants to keep his guns. And I just remember, my old friend just bashing him like in a demeaning way. So I stood up for my father-in-law, and that was it. I was like, okay, that's it.
Guns are one issue where you can really lose people over. I was newly single early last year, and did some dating out here in Los Angeles, and that was one subject. Once we got to, I would start to think to myself, all right, this is going to end pretty soon because I can't be too silent on that stuff. But it's very rare to find, at least out here, someone who doesn't already hold very anti-gun views.
Right. Yeah. I don't know how you do. Well, I guess I do know how you do it in LA. Even though I'm in Atlanta, I do it the way, I travel, but yeah, that's tough. That's tough.
JJ, I wanted to ask you, as you mentioned, you're pretty active in a lot of the private groups, and I've seen you active in the Mises Caucus group. So I'm curious, do you have any plans or desires to get involved in the Libertarian Party at all, or to become more, directly politically active?
I don't have any plans. I don't have any plans to do that. I eat, sleep, and breathe music. Well, I'm a dad now, and I have been for 7 years now. But, I love being a dad and all that. But part of me, I don't see myself doing that. Who knows? I mean, I can't say no, but I don't have any plans to do that. I barely have enough time in a day to finish making my album, that I'm recording now.
But in fairness, you never had plans to be a guitarist. And here you are.
That's true. I always just wanted to be John Bonham,
So you never know. Now you mentioned your album. Is that your own album that you're working on?
Yeah, my wife's a musician as well. So we have a band called Fire and the Knife, and it's like roots rock, southern like rock and stuff. And she sings and writes, and we're recording a new album. So when I'm not on the road with Arrested Development, I'm doing a lot of local gigs and Southeast stuff with our duo. Sometimes, like once a month, we'll have a full band show, but a lot of times we're doing just duo stuff. But yeah, we're in the middle of writing and recording a record right now. We're doing it in our home. This is, you can probably see the drums. This is my living room. Literally, I got all this studio gear. You can't see it behind my computer, but I got all this speakers and studio gear like in the living room, because acoustically, this is the best sounding room for the drums and stuff. So my wife was awesome enough to let us uproot the entire house. So yeah.
Cool. Great. Well, we'll have to link to that, link to any of your work doing, and keep our listeners up to date on all your projects. So, JJ, I really do appreciate you coming on, sharing your story a little bit. I always love to hear how people became libertarians. That's the reason I started the show, is to dig into that. So I was pleased to have you on. Before I let you go, one more time, why don't you let everybody out there know how they can find you if they do want to follow you on Twitter, or how they can find all of your other work?
Yeah, on Instagram, you can follow me there too, JJ Boogie, just the letters JJBOOGIE. You could follow ArrestedDevelopmentMusic.com, find out when we're coming to your town. You could come heckle me if you want, from the audience. And then Fire and the Knife Music on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram as well. We appreciate it.
Very cool. Well, Jason, JJ Boogie Reichert, I really do appreciate you coming on, and I'll see you around. I'll see you around the Lions Liberty Forum. I'll see you on Twitter. I'll see you all over the place because you're out there and part of the conversation.
Thank you, brother.
All right, kiddos, I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Jason J.J. Boogie Reichert. It's always great to find new libertarians in places you don't necessarily expect them. So once I saw this character, JJ Boogie, commenting all over the place, commenting in our forum, and I realized he was a member of a quite well-known band, I figured, hey, why not hear from him? Maybe he can help cross people over who are sort of in those other areas, who are in the hip-hop realm, who might be attracted to his interview just simply because of who he is, simply because he's in the band, simply because maybe they are a friend of his and they see this interview posted. And that's the kind of thing that I think can really get people's minds churning. And that's the goal here. That's why we do these shows, not necessarily to create new libertarians overnight, but to at least interest people in the ideas, find out how other people came down this journey, and that can help you perhaps guide others down the same journey to the ideas of liberty as well. Now, as I mentioned at the top of the show, I do have a special announcement regarding the format of this program. As many of you know, one of our most popular segments over the years has been Libertarians in Living Rooms Drinking Liquor, where I gather fellow Lions of Liberty hosts like Brian and John, our other great contributors like Howie, Rico, JB, and occasionally some special guests, and we all just kind of have a very laid-back, loosey-goosey, drunken chat about liberty, and people seem to really love that. It always gets our best download numbers, but we just have so much other programming that we're doing between my interviews, Brian's look at comedy and culture, John's look at the broken criminal justice system, and the amazing interviews he's done with so many people that have been screwed over and really overcame those injustices in often a very inspiring way. So we wanted to continue to bring you that content while also trying to figure out a way to bring you some of that different format of content, the more laid-back conversational type shows, which I know are what attracted many to this program in the first place. And a lot of that content does live behind the paywall right now. We, on our Patreon, we do Conspiracy Corner, which is a roundtable format. Degenerate Gamblers is a weekly program in a very similar format, which really often turns into old stories from our college days. And I really feel that a lot of that stuff is some of our best content. So we wanted to find a way to bring some of our better content forward to you guys, the stuff that really got so many people interested in this program in the first place without really sacrificing the current variety show format. So what we've decided to do, instead of me just trying to cram it in wherever I can once a month or so, we've decided that every single month, each of our programs is going to host a Libertarians in Living Rooms Drinking Liquor style show. So I will do one on one Monday a month. On a different Wednesday, Brian is going to host a Libertarians in Living Rooms Drinking Liquor episode of Electric Liberty Land. And then John will also do a more criminal justice centered roundtable type format show on Felony Friday. So we're going to bring you a lot more of this conversational format that has proven so successful both on the main show as well as from our Patreon, always our most popular stuff on there as well. And of course, we'll continue to do what we're doing on Patreon. We'll do bonus Libertarians in Living Rooms Drinking Liquor shows, bonus episodes after every one of those shows. So you'll at least get 3 of those on the Patreon every month, where we'll take a lot of questions from Pride members. So again, you can check that out at patreon.com/Lions of Liberty. But our main format is not changing at all. You're going to get the same exact variety that you get every single Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. You're just going to get a lot more of those Libertarians in Living Rooms Drinking Liquor style shows, and that also opens up a lot more space to bring on some other guests, work in a lot of the friends of the show and that sort of thing. So we're very excited about this format. That's going to officially start in March as I try to organize our next big Liberty Draft show, which requires all 6 of the Lions of Liberty. So that one's a little more difficult to coordinate, but we'll be doing that one hopefully sometime in February. So that is the gist of it. You can look forward to more alcohol-fueled roundtables featuring some of your favorite libertarian podcasters. Very excited about what is ahead for us here in 2019 and beyond. And again, today's episode of Lions of Liberty has been brought to you by mathbot.com. The pen may be mightier than the sword, but code is even mightier than the pen. So learn how to build the tools that will bring prosperity and freedom to the world, and learn how to code at mathbot.com. That's mathbot.com. Become mighty, my friends. And until next time, live long and live free.
you tired of banging your head against the proverbial wall of politics and getting nowhere toward actually making your life more free? Are you tired of interview podcasts that have the same guests as every other libertarian interview podcast out there? Are you tired of hearing the same news stories that you can hear on the mainstream media? Then you need to listen to The Lava Flow, where we don't do politics and we don't do the major stories that exist only to divide you. We talk about news that affects you and your freedom, and we work to find solutions that can actually help you to be more free. Check us out at thelavaflow.com.
Listen to Weird Libertarians at WeirdLibertarians.com. My name is Chris Spangle, and I host a show where we talk about the stories you and your friends are talking about, and then we give you libertarian solutions so you sound smarter when you're talking to your friends. We're going to make you sound like a genius. Tune in now at WeirdLibertarians.com.
Are those dry, boring, run-of-the-mill political talk shows putting you to sleep on your commute or at work? Are you ready for some fun?
Look no further. Blast Off with Johnny Rocket is a Seattle-based podcast expressing viewpoints of free markets, voluntary exchange, badass music, wicked banner, and of course, drinking.
The Blast Off doesn't shy from the truth, but always brings the party.
Let's rock and roll, Raylene.
Bring it on, Johnny.
You can check us out at thelaunchpadmedia.com/blastoff.
Again, that's thelaunchpadmedia.com/blastoff.
Launchpad Media. Always launching ideas in your direction.
And now I'm crying over you.